He has no way out of this virtual world, and his only goal is to use his unlimited powers to win the game so that humanity can return to his normal world. After waking up in an abandoned city overgrown with vegetation, Shiro realizes that he is inside the game and finds a bunch of other players who are also completely confused. He finds the menu and tries to exit the game but fails before checking his friends list and calling some of his friends' old party members call. Right now to meet him, Shiro touches the grass for the first time, which makes him happy, and they begin to explore the world to get more information. While walking on the bridge, he notices one of his group members named Ikatsuki on the roof of a building they meet, and Ikatsuki asks Shiro for a plastic surgery potion before turning into his true form as a small furry assassin. The next morning, Shiro and his gang meet Mary, one of his friends and the leader of a small guild. In her guild building, she tells them that several other guilds are preparing to use this world and other players, and asks Shiro to join her guild since he has experience working side by side with her, the most powerful party in the game. Shiro refuses and tells her that she should not expect that the game will be the same as before since the moon in this world seem different. After sunset, they go to a forest filled with monsters, where after a short walk they are attacked by a bunch of squirrel monsters, but when Now tries to fight them he gets confused in the controls. A line up in battle formation, while Now struggles strength tries to block the attacks and shake off the creatures when Shiro gets caught in a monstrous plan that throws him to the ground, and Katsuki immediately jumps up and chops the plant, killing him right away. I finally pulled myself together and activated my shield to destroy the monsters, while Shiro uses his magic along with the attacks of Na and Akatsuki to kill all the monsters in the area. The next day, news spreads that the guy died during the fight. Just like in the game, he was resurrected by the monster, and Shiro ties up the monster before Katsuki finishes him off with a knife. Later that night, they walk through the woods again while Shiro tells them that there is a brewing coming towards them in the city, and a lot of fights are constantly breaking out in the city. According to his information, the number of player kills has increased as players are falling on each other to steal loot and gain experience, which is a drain move, but they can't do anything about it. After entering the city, they sent someone forward, and suddenly Neo finds himself tied up, but Shiro immediately cancels his action. He sends a light bulb forward and can notice for enemies who seem to be player killers. They all head towards their heroes ready to fight, and the battle begins. Neo fights two enemies at once, blocking their attacks and counterattacks, while the girl tries to attack Shiro, but only to be rooted to the ground. One of the swordsmen tries to free her, but Now uses his special ability, which makes enemies attack him. Shiro realizes that for a long time will last as his health decreases, so he does a small electric attack on the enemies, and it takes time to affect them until they push him back. Suddenly, they find themselves bound by magical spikes, and Now use this time to attack them, causing huge damage. This scares the other enemies, and they scream for the healer to heal them, but it turns out that Shiro has long put him to sleep. While Neo kills the guy with the hammer, the girl tries to attack him, but Neo chases her and hits the guy with the sword, starts calling for reinforcements when Akatsuki appears from the forest dragging two ugly men behind him, and they all surround the last enemy. The last guy immediately falls to the ground and apologizes, but it turns out to be fake as he attacks Shiro, but Akatsuki immediately kills him. After that, they relax by the fire when Neo gets kneed in the face after he says that Akatsuki has no conspiracy. Shiro just sits and plans that they can fight monsters to earn money and find a good place to stay for the night, but he understands that this will not be enough to return back to Earth. Before he can think of anything, he receives a call from Mary, who urgently calls him. Now next to him is the botanist Shiro, and Yusuke goes to the guild, where Mary excitedly tells him about a girl named Sarah who went to another city but ended up in trouble. Shiro quickly calculated that they will have to travel for 100 kilometers to get to the city fighting monsters. He asks she is hiding any information, and finally she reveals that Sarah was saved by several good ones players, so now she wants Shiro and his group to go and help the Sari return. Shiro realizes that this mission will last over 30 days and thinks about what might happen when Katsuki and Neo say that they want Shiro to accept the task. Inspired, he agrees to the task, and with the first rays of the sun they set off and called their horses before setting off. After riding half a day on horseback, they take a short break while Shiro looks at the map, and soon they have their shitty tasteless lunch, which they despise. After this, they are again about to continue on their way, but this time Akatsuki stops Shiro when she tries to call a horse, while Shiro and Now whistles differently, and suddenly a pair of griffins come down from the sky and land next to them, and Katsuki seems to be afraid of them, while Shiro sits on the beaked wing and tells her to jump on it. She sits behind him, and the griffin takes off into the sky, flying over the beautiful scenery so that they can quickly to reach their destination. Only a couple of days had passed since they began their adventure, but thanks to the griffin, they were able to move around the surrounding area very quickly and even reached the mountain, where a flock of dragons lived nearby. They decided to rest to little, and for the sake of Griffin they went on foot. After that, they reached the great dungeon, which they need to cross to get to their destination. They began to wander through the ruins, which looks much more realistic, when suddenly they noticed rat monsters on the wall capable of spreading plague. They moved forward, where they came across more monsters blocking the path, but instead of fighting, Shiro decides to take an alternative path. After that, they decide to take a break while Shiro checks the map, and Neo complains about how bad the food is no matter what they do they still do it. It is impossible to make it taste better. While Shira was eating he received a call from Mary, who was shocked to learn that he was already in ruins, but she informed Shira that Sarah was still safe as she was talking to her through a function inside the game call, and for a while she hides with a nice player whom she loves was mentioned. Meanwhile, Sarah is in the house of a nice player and does housework as befits any woman. She completely tidies up the house just in time for the arrival of her savior, who turns out to be a real fluffy. He tells her that the situation in this city is still bad as adventurers bully weaker players and NPCs break their shops. He tells her not to worry, and she tells him that the rescue party is already got to the ruins, which impresses the kitty. Back in the ruins, Shira and his group are moving on an old stone bridge over the river when Shira tells him to stop as the bridge is about to collapse, but before he could do anything it ended with him falling into the river and passing out. While he was unconscious, he remembers how much he liked this game because unlike real life here he had friends who liked him and wanted to have a party with him. He also remembers his old party where he even underscore a girl, but suddenly he would be about Katsuki and now they were together worried about him. Now he informs him that Akatsuki jumped in to save him, and then he had to save them both. Shira checks for injuries before they start moving again. They've passed through different areas and passing through a crystal mine. And Katsuki tells them that she is a college student, which surprises them and now makes fun of her slow plot development, which leads to a slap in the face. They start moving again when suddenly they are transported to a completely different realm and notice a huge ball of fur in the air. It turns out it's a giant rat who looks better than me, and Shira orders a fight. Now blocks the attack while Akatsuki strikes and Neo chops the rat by the tail. Shira looks for an opportunity, and when Neo's attack, Shira uses binding spells while the others attack the rat. Ratatouille, still alive and now flies to the wall while Shira uses a stunning spell saving him. While Akatsuki finishes him off with the last blow, they return to their real life and the ruins, and there where they see a beautiful sunset over the sea. Meanwhile, back in the city, a large guild robs and kills other players without any regrets when one ugly member of the guild refuses to work and is killed by Wolverine himself. He introduces himself as Mike, as the leader of the guild, who orders the others to kill and rob any player they want since it's just a game, and also shouts at them to find Sarah and the underscore above. Finally, Shira and his group arrived outside the city where everything seemed to be destroyed by goons from the Player Killer Guild. Shira decides to go straight to the city to meet Sarah at a predetermined location, but he talks about Katsuki going undercover in the city to get more information. As soon as they enter the city, and Shira and May notice Demi's thugs who are present throughout the city, while Shira ignores them and goes into the crystal dungeon where he finds Sarah waiting for him. She thanks him for coming. At that time, when a kitten appears from behind, whom Shira recognizes, it turns out that Shira and the cat known as the leader are old comrades who once played together. They all begin to go outside, while Shira tells him about the present moment and about Katsuki. Shira asks the chief to return with them to the main city, and he eventually agrees, which makes Sarah happy. And Katsuki calls Shira and tells him that the guild is looking for them all over the city, which scares Sarah. But Shira tells her not to worry, and they are all just Emiko are leaving in the streets, and his goons immediately notice them while Shira boldly walks through them and tells Sarah not to worry as they can't be attacked. Inside the city, he tells her that the enemies will attack them once they are outside the gates of this area. It scares Sarah as the players begin to group around them, slowly waiting for them to come outside, but the chief tells her not to, worrying as they will take care of it once they get outside. They discover the Liver King on the throne surrounded by his cronies, while Shai and the chief insult Mikasa, who immediately appears in front of them. The chief confronts him and challenges him to a one-on-one fight, which he tries to avoid, but Shuru makes fun of his ugly purple hair and tells him to live his life, which enrages him, and he agrees to fight. He immediately jumps and hits the ground, while the chief dodges and lands back, snatching his ball. Sasquatch attacks the kitty, who blocks the blow and lands back before attacking the Demic, who also blocks the attacks. Dekas jumps forward to hit the ground and then delivers an electric strike, which the chief dodges before attacking, but the Dekos teleports and attacks again, only to be blocked again by the chief. However, he loses or health and is forced to go on the attack, where he damages Mikas, who begins to realize his weakness and shouts to his squad to help him. A bunch of enemies run towards the chieftain, but Na intervenes and stuns them all. The chieftain attacks again, but the healers heal Mikas, while now he begins to choke the Stera, uses his healing spell against the chieftain, but it is not strong enough, and Mikas strikes, sending the chieftain into the forest. They collide again, and this time Mikas dodges the attack and pushes the chieftain away, while now forced to use his absolute defense, which blocks everything for 10 seconds, and within that time Sarah healed him. It seems that all is lost when the chief gets hit again, but he lands on his feet, and when Demika runs towards him, Shiri uses his thorn binding spell, while the chief dodges his attacks and uses a powerful combo, immediately defeating the house. Everyone was shocked to see their ugly leader on the floor and tried to attack him, and Katsuki appear behind them and killed them all with one blow. He realizes that the chief is extremely strong, so how he was able to hit Demiko over 100 times into seconds, completely destroying him, while now distracting everyone else. Shira turns to the survivors and tells them to fall back, but Domiket It's up again ready to kick Shira's ass, but ends up getting a beating from Sero, which kills him. Shira and his group immediately called the Griffin and left the original city after a short journey. They landed to get some rest at night, and the Shiras began having trouble setting up camp since he had never touched grass before. Meanwhile, Sarah and the chief, who were collecting firewood, noticed a deer, and the chief decided to try the carnivore diet. One day later that night, they finally set up a tent and started eating garbage food, and suddenly they smelled something and followed the trail to find the chief, who cooks barbecue like a real American. They think that the food will be disgusting, but after trying a piece they discover that it tastes like real juicy meat and begin eat it like my ex. They ask what your tastes in food are. The chef replies that they just order ABR, which has a disgusting taste, and to get good food, they have to cook it themselves and beat the meat so that it becomes tender. They try to cook, but everything burns right away. But the chef replies that in order to cook this you need to show your culinary skills and not be an idiot. Sandwiches. Later that evening, the chef tells the Akatsuka that he and Shiro used to be at the same party called Tea Party. Akatsuki makes fun of the name of their men's party Beta, but remembers that their rank is very high and they can do combos together, which she can't do. The next day they go on a trip again, and at night they take a break and eat a bunch of fish that the chief caught, while Sarah, who has problems with her father, thinks about the baby luring him into a trap. Later that night, when Sarah was sleeping, Shiro remembers a boy and a girl who were new to the game and came to him for advice, and he even taught them the basics. He worries about them because of all these killings of players, but now tells him not to worry so much. The next day they set off again, but noticing a cluster of clouds, they decide to hide. They land in the village, and by the time it starts to rain they find a mansion which they enter without knocking. As my parents, an old NPC appears who welcomes them to the village and says that they can spend the night in the bar if they want, and they happily agree. Later, when the old man's grandchildren arrive, they sit on the table and start playing Akatsuki. This forces Shiro realize that in this game even the non-player characters have feelings and memories, and unlike the adventurers, if they die one day, they will die forever. After that, Chief and Sarah return from bathing in the rave and show them a bunch of local products that they bought and decide to bake cookies. It seems to be liked by the children. Meanwhile, a group of adventurers dressed in rags walks in the rain, and next to them is Toya and Minnow, the brothers and sisters whom Shiro taught. Toya supports his sister who injured, while their leader, who is too ugly to show his face, shouts at them to move. Toya tells Minnow that the Ku Klux Klan enthusiast is so high level that he attracts all the monsters that get injured every day. Eventually they make it to the barn, where they are given very little food, and the next morning they are sent to fight again. After countless days they finally reach Akibo, where the guild has organized a huge party for Sero. While the guild's chef taught the secrets of cooking, everyone seems happy, but later that night, when everyone is asleep, Mary tells Sira that she wants to talk alone, hoping to finally pat him on the ass. He agrees, but ends up treating him to tea and starts treating him like his gay best friend. When she leaves him due to injury, she explains that the Akibas have been acting pretty shitty for a while. Even though there are no more player killings happening, she tells him that the guilds are monopolizing this area with their power, and those who are strong enough occupy the best hunting grounds to gain levels while driving away other players. After that, she told him that they called a meeting of small guilds to finally accept communism and create a council. Unlike the Soviet Union, it fell apart due to internal strife. She also told him that one of the guilds is trying to reach even higher levels to control the entire territory and fights very strong monsters in the mountains, and also uses an experience potion. This shocks him since experience potions are only given to beginners to make it easier for them to pass the levels at the beginning, but now they are taken away. This makes him furious, and he leads into the night to get acquainted with a girl, but he can only imagine them. In the end, she finds him, and they go to a rock where they talk about their feelings like real men holding hands, and this reminds Shur of his days with an old party, which prompts him to contact Minnow. He calls her and starts asking if she is okay and also if she is taking the potion to increase experience. After answering, she gets sick with COVID, so he turns off the call, thinking that this will help them escape. The next morning, she returned to Mary's guild and asked them for help. What shocked them, he said that he wants to destroy the guild that is capturing new players and stealing the experience potion from them. He laughs to destroy them in the Kiba, and after that he also wants to end all the other guilds that want to monopolize their powers in this area. He tells them that he also created a guild, which shocks Mary since he hated them before, but she is happy for him and agrees to help. Shira tells them that money is everything and everyone in this world is looking for gold, so to change everything they will need 5 million gold, which shocks Mary and Henry, who say that they won't be able to get that much money no matter what. The next day they start the boar hunt, but Shira tells them to catch them alive, as if they are killing them there is much less meat, but if they catch him they can get much more use out of him, so they start catching them. Meanwhile, the whole guild is now busy with work, and most of all Mary is busy with paperwork for approving the budget, while Akatsuki is tracking down the enemies when she witnesses two guys make a dubious deal involving experience potions. Back at the guild, the guys brought a huge number of boars, while their plan was put into action as the board was prepared the next morning. When all the players were afraid without a delicious breakfast, Mary and her company set up a food stall, and the distribution of leaflets ended with a simple purchase of 1 burger for his girlfriend. This is the one who will try the burger and end up liking it because of which everyone will start buying food crying with happiness. The line becomes longer than in the advertisement on YouTube, but the chef and the others tear up the burgers while the others catch even more boars as a result. The food gets to almost all the inhabitants of Akiba and all the large guilds begin to try to steal the recipe. Meanwhile, now his gang catches a herd of boars and returns back while one young man stays behind to catch even more and eventually finds the boss of the boars returning to the guild. Henry calculates their earnings and claims that today, they earned about P gold. Akir dissatisfied with the fact that it will take them for months to get 5 million gold. While they were talking, Shio finally returned with a huge boar on and tired fell asleep. Shira contacted Minnow and told her not to lose faith as he would come very soon to rescue her, and he himself went with the boss to meet one of his former party members, Suji, who founded his own guild which became quite strong. Shira tells him that he also created a guild shocking Suji but then says that he needs help. He tells Suji that they want to make this world a better place and he immediately agrees. The next morning, he and his guild begin to help with the food stalls. While Shira is preparing to begin the next stage of his plan, they invite one of the largest guilds that controls all the ingredients to seal a business deal, and Mary and Henry both sit down at the table and ask the leader named Shin who supplied the ingredients to cure diabetes. Henry tells him the price they are willing to pay for it, but Shin is a businessman and begins to bargain when Henry stands up and tells them that other guilds also come to sell their ingredients, which scares the Tyran. In the end, he makes a deal with them for the supply of an endless amount of ingredients resources. Meanwhile, Minnow is forced to sue the Leather Armor Guild because she is sad because of her situation and she thinks about how she cried when she was first transferred to this game. Tanya helped her with everything and gradually they began to have fun, but soon they were chased and captured by the guild of player killers who defeated them and killed them. After that, she woke up in the church where she met Toa and they were sad because they had nothing else. That's when this guild hired them and began to exploit them. When we returned to the meeting, the leaders of the other trade guilds arrived. One of them was Brock Lesnar and the other was mad scientist Hugh and the Godfather. They were shocked to see that Shin was already there and asked Henry why they were called. Henry replied that they had already agreed with Shin about the ingredients, but for the next task that they are going to perform, they need something more. This attracts the attention of all three, and they start thinking about their profit, but Henry tells them that she can't reveal the whole plan now, but for it to work they need a total of 5 million gold coins. It shocks everyone, but they think that the profit should be even more. Henry tells them that as a sign of trust their guild is ready to share with them the secret recipe for making all these delicious dishes, and then she tells them that they have already earned 500 gold coins and they need another 45 million. They all start screaming that they want to invest, while Henry tells them that she will take equal amounts of money from all of them. After that, Zero sends an invitation to the conference to all the major lead players from the main guilds, who ultimately accept the invitation since they all have heard their name in the gate, while Sira contacts Minnow and tells her that he will save them tomorrow. The next day, representatives of all the major guilds arrive at the bank building one by one, and the spectators are in shock because at the moment these are the highest ranked players in the entire world. All the major combatants, the guilds, enter the game and are seated at a round table. As soon as everyone is seated, Shira stands up and begins to say that he wants to propose a plan to save a kid from self-destruction, but the botanist from the largest guild stops him and says that the smaller guilds have already held a conference, and the dwarf agrees that the conference was rather useless since they ended up quarreling among themselves. The long-haired elf stands up and says that he does not care about the city and he comes here just to sell his goods and leaves the hall. In the meantime, Mina says that last night Shai told her that he will send Akatsuki to the guild building to protect them, while now it will be in the church to save someone there, and they plan to just run out of the building. Returning to the council, Shira announces that the people present at the council represent all the players in the world right now and they must make this world a safer place to live since people are being exploited for their experience and doing potions. The guy in black armor looks at him and says that there is nothing illegal in this, but Shiro reminds him that there are no laws in this world, and recently he visited a city where the ruling guild was torturing NPCs and players in the area for their own good. According to him, they should set some rules, and if anyone disobeys, they can throw him out of the city. The dude in black armor tells him that they cannot fight against such strong fighting guilds themselves, but Shai tells him shut up and claims that he bought the bank building this morning. This just shocks them because it means that he can decide who can come and who can, and also set all the rules inside the building. This means that these huge guilds will not be able to access their money that they put in the bank, can will not be able to use their teleportation door, and also the Shira blacklist them. Meanwhile, Minnow and the others finally start to run away, but in the end the enemy knocks her down, but before he can do anything then, and grabs him by the throat so that he cannot call for help. The ninja attacks him, and he defends himself, pushing the ninja away with Minnow's help. Before escaping, everyone escapes except Minnow and Tuya, who are affected by the leader's dark magic, but Minnow uses defensive magic can. They are somehow able to escape through the door while the leader's enemies are stuck. Just when they thought everything was fine, the leader attacks them, grabs Toya and starts hurting him, but Akatsuki arrives and frees him before he is transported to the present, who easily captures him, returning to Shiro's council. Directly blackmails them into agreeing with him, since otherwise they will essentially lose the most basic abilities in this game, which will be very harmful for them. He proposes to make this city safe and have a law that everyone must follow. Mary gets up and reveals the secret of her food to everyone, which shocks them, while the trade guilds along with Shiro explain that they can create whatever they want just like in the real world if they have the ability. The items needed for it. Further, Shiro says that people are bored because there is nothing to buy or do in this world, and when new products start appearing, people will start earning money so that they can spend it, which will solve this problem. After that, he also introduced a rule according to which killing players should be prohibited, and even NPCs should have equal rights to everything because, unlike in-game characters, these are real people of the guild. They seem to have been caught. They agree to the rules. In a week, this whole place has been transformed and has become more like an ordinary city where people have fun and live their lives. Meanwhile, the group that kidnapped the players was expelled from the city, never to return, and the player ended up joining Mary's guild. After that, Shiro also started cleaning up the place for his guild, where Shin visits him and advises him to hire an NPC to work instead of the players, but Shiro doesn't do that. Makes me feel bad about the wilderness. Mary and Suji arrive at the new guild house and are surprised to find that it is already completed, but Shiro tells them that the merchant guild created everything and Ike from the battle guild helped them clean everything up. Later that evening, the chief went out to buy groceries and saw that Toa and Minnow were standing on the street, who claimed that they did not join Mary's guild because they want to work with Shiro himself. After all, he helped them so much. Shiro seems unsure of this, but agrees to accept them into his guild before having dinner under the night sky. The city looks more lively than ever so far, and Minnow is training in the jungle to fight plant monsters. Minnow is getting better at providing support, while Akatsuki is now finishing off monsters. After this, while eating, Neo explains that Akatsuki Emma is a teenager playing on his nerves, for which he gets kicked in the face. Later that day, Mary calls Shiro and the others, since this time this girl has a good plan and wants to organize a camp for the younger ones to level up the players so they can get better at the game, while at the same time wanting a break from all this work. Rumors quickly spread throughout the region, while Toyota trains at night to become better. The next morning, when Shiro planned camp, he received information that a group of strange people is approaching the city. They come out to meet them, while all the NPCs bow when the leader of the group announces that he is here on behalf of the King of Isis and wants to meet with the leaders of the council and the botanist and Sirami, with a man who invites them to a dance in the royal capital before heading back. After that, the seer talks to the botanist and says that he is worried about interfering in their politics, but assures him that they do not need worrying because they are much stronger. The next day, they all go on their own missions. Half of them go through the countryside with all the newbies to an abandoned school where a training camp is being held, while Shira and the others, a decision of the council, ghosted up to meet the Shy King. Shira seems worried that the NPCs may become more powerful, and beforehand sent Mary and Minnow to investigate whatever they can, but Beam seems to be enjoying his vacation more. After 2 hours, Shira and his company reach the Ice Palace, where they finally enter, and by that time, as night falls, a celebration begins. Soon the king comes down to meet them, and Shira freezes like a complete loser while the nerd is talking, and they end up talking when the king comes down to meet them. The king wants to know more about how Kiba works. Just at that moment, Princess Lane appears, and they all start staring at her like she's a bunch of insults. Meanwhile, back at the camp, they announce that tomorrow the newbies will be doing their first dungeon on their own, which scares them a little. In dungeons usually have light monsters, but many strong monsters guard the treasure there, and because of the small area, it is very difficult to fight them. Meanwhile, a dance begins in the castle, and the king asks if Shiro wants to join then, and although he hesitates, Henry, locked in the room, says the freak underscore by making him dance with her in front of everyone. After the dance, Shira sits down on the sofa in complete exhaustion, but Minnow calls him and tells him about their plan for the dungeon, but Shira asks her to stop crying like a little girl before Minnow calls him sexy and hangs up. The next morning, Shira and her group sit down at the table to have a nice breakfast and start discussing politics. In the game, he explains that the NPCs have the majority, and now they understand the power of the players in their worlds, so soon they will try to make alliances with them to seize power for themselves. This could be problematic as they may try to bribe some guilds, which could lead to war, so Sir sends Akatsuki to do some investigations. Meanwhile, at the training camp, she gathers them near the forest and divides them into teams. If we're leaving them alone just like my father did, To and Mio ends up teaming up with Sarah and Suzu, and a pompous bastard named Rudy, who thinks he's too strong. Rudy ends up befriending To, who is just as brainless, and both of these idiots lead them to a dungeon where they are stopped, who tells Tay to leave, just beat the tank and don't do anything stupid, while the chief encourages Mina to be confident in herself. They enter the dungeon and start walking in the dark, which, as they expected, is very scary for the girls, but Rudy uses his massive staff to create several balls of light, and following his example, Sarah also creates some light. They set off again, and before reaching 2 entrances, they see a bunch of skeletons. They take one of them and while walking Minnow realizes that Rudy is completely dead brain and she will need to save him when suddenly Toya orders them to stop as he notices 3 skeletons, but Rudy ends up making some noise. Toya immediately runs forward and uses magic making the skeletons attack and then uses super punches, uses his healing spell on Dao while he enters the fight when Rudy takes out his staff and sends a fireball that hits all the skeletons before using Suzu to fire another shot which kills, and the last one. While he was celebrating, he accidentally caught an arrow, and they saw a skeleton from Minecraft with a bob. Toya immediately ran towards him, but found that even more skeletons were waiting for him. Minnow tries to support him, while Toyota fights and Rudy helps him with his magic. This Anjay the skeletons who run to Rudy to prepare a salad from Kaiser and he retreats. Under attack while he falls low, in the most pathetic form they escape from the dungeon. Meanwhile the nerd notices that the princess is alone and solves it. Resurrect, he starts talking to her, but the princess has dealt with many losers like him and doesn't give him time before leaving to take her self-portrait. After that, while walking through the corridors, she heard some noise and noticed a botanist who was sparring with the soldiers but easily defeated them. The princess is sitting on a chair while they are watching the matches when the nerd announces that whoever wins the competition will get the opportunity to have tea with the princess, which is very important. It worries everyone. A crowd gathers in the arena when the nerd fights with a big fat whale before defeating him. Everyone claps their hands, but the princess is still not impressed. Meanwhile, the others run across the bridge and find a room in which they lock themselves in. They sit down to rest for a while, but Rudy starts saying nasty things to them, claiming that the healers are being stupid, but Toy shuts him up and says that he's a complete noob who doesn't know how to play. Heather on the beach Mary enjoys the best spectacle of her life with her sin catching giant crabs, while the newcomers fight with them to prepare the horn of crabs, and the chief is still holding a session with the brothers at the campsite back at the castle. The leader of the merchant guild is invited to dinner, where the lord tells him that they are willing to go for it, give them more raw materials, but the monsters attack them on the sushi, so they ask the merchant to create a ship for them. Meanwhile, the nerd takes the princess out onto the balcony, where he begins to be chased by a crowd of stupid girls who will definitely pose only for fans. He somehow sends them away before telling the princess that he is a cultured man who appreciates a good pair of juicy thighs and tells her that she reminds him of his sister, telling him that he is from Alabama and wants to help to her. When she finds herself in a difficult situation on the other side, Shira notices Akatsuki running around like an idiot and sits down to talk, when suddenly they sense danger as a creepy hooded man appears who introduces himself as Macragan. Shira takes him to the library along with Akatsuki, and Rufy watches him while Mac asks about Shira's magic bag, which surprises him since only high-level adventurers know about it. Regal notices it and explains that he is a scientist magician who is greatly underpaid, like any other scientist, and explains that he is known as the magician of the Lake Merrill. Shiro immediately recognizes his name and speaks about Katsuki, that the Mac Lake of the world is a big myth inside the game, but he doesn't know how to do it, never thought that they actually exist. Shiro is very excited because this guy can answer a lot of questions that he, as the magician, starts talking and tells them that he is studying world-class magic, which even Shiro doesn't seem to know about. So Regan explains that there are 8 different types of magical abilities that allow you to attack one enemy, a group of enemies, several groups of enemies, and so on. In addition, there are nuclear charges with which you can destroy an entire castle or an army, even an entire continent, and their power lies in world-class magic that can destroy the entire world. Shira doubts that such magic exists, but Regan says that it exists and has already been used 3 times with the help of a spell called World Faction. Shira immediately became interested and asked him about the times when this magic was used earlier. Meanwhile, his company is sitting around the fire thinking about their failed attempts to clear the dungeon and want to enter them again, even though they are tired, but now laugh at them for running like underscore, but tells them to get some rest before heading out again. They all climb into their tents, and while Toa thinks about the strategy, Minnow looks through the notes that Sierra gave her back at the library. Regan begins his story by telling how 300 years ago the world was much more developed and peaceful and controlled all the people, elves, gnomes, and owls, who were special magicians. Owls were the fewest of those who controlled the entire monopoly when it came to magical inventions, which irritated the other races because no one launched XSHO Slizmater. The other 3 races eventually destroyed them, and the rest were used as slaves. Because of this massacre, 6 ghosts were born who started a war to take revenge on the other races, but were defeated because they were outnumbered, and it was then they decided to copy America and dropped a nuclear bomb that almost destroyed the world. And from the remains, monsters were born because of the wars. Many people died, and their souls eventually turned into these monsters who began to push humanity to the brink of extinction. Because of this, humanity decided to study magic, and they themselves created a group of semi-humans who were stronger, and they fought against the monsters. Along with this, predecessors were also created, which according to Sir are NPCs, but strong enough to fight adventure. Regan continued that the enemies continued to reincarnate for some reason that became a problem, and Sierra understands that he is talking about rebirth. For example, when you kill enemies, they disappear from that area for a while, but they are reborn again so that other players can defeat them. After that, Regan tells them that because of this problem, the war between humanity and Monsters was endless, and that's when the Second World faction was used, and that's when the adventurers appeared for the first time in history. He also states that Shira's name almost immediately became quite famous, and he knew that even Shira is a magician, and that's why he wanted to talk to him. Among others council members, Shira understands that the time frame is the same as Shira started playing the game, only at this time. And when the game was launched, that's when the Second World faction happened. Regan says that recently he studied HPN and found out that if a person dies and his life changes, a soul is released in the air. But a powerful magician can use resurrection magic, like which returns the soul back to the body and the player comes back to life. The main problem is that the player will lose a certain amount of experience points, or in other words, his memories. This means that whenever the player reincarnated in the church, he loses part of his memories without even knowing it. The next morning, the Shiro seems worried when he walks next to Akatsuki and explains that no one knows about the mechanics of memory loss once you die right now, and so as not to create panic, they should keep it a secret for the time being. And Akatsuki agrees. Back in the jungle, Minho wakes up and checks her inventory, while Isuzu also melts and states that she couldn't sleep last night before going swim in the lake. Tuya also wakes up grumpy and just goes into the forest to take a leak. While walking through the woods, Isuzu notices Ruby, who is working out in the woods alone, but as soon as he notices her, he starts acting like he's just wandering around the area. She invites him to breakfast, which is toasting before heading back. When we get back to the camp, it starts to rain, but they have a delicious hot meal, which everyone seems to enjoy except the one who looks worried. Suddenly Rudy gets up and says that they should go back in the dungeon. That such Minho pats himself on the back to get motivation and says that they are not ready yet. There is still a dungeon to fight. Everyone looks at Minho when she tells them that they should wait until noon. Rudy interrupts her and says that she should go back to the kitchen since the men are here to gain more experience levels as soon as possible. But Minho makes fun of him for running like underscore in the dungeons whenever they are attacked. Rudy asks what she wants to do and Minho replies that they need to put on face masks and relax a little. Rudy gets angry about this because he considers himself straight, but Suzu tells him that he can't know for sure until he tries the sausage himself. Minho tells them that she can't develop a strategy because she doesn't know anything about them and their abilities. She needs to know if the player is comfortable playing from behind cover or if he wants to rush the enemy, so she asks everyone to tell her what they want. Rudy starts by saying that he likes to use his fireball the most because that it is very powerful and he can use it every 10 seconds. While Mina recurs, this makes Tuya think, and he tells them that his ability to taunt provokes enemies to attack him because they think that Tuya is calling them. They act like underscore and they rush to attack him. The problem is that before his taunt reaches them, they are hit by Rui's fireball, causing them to attack Rudy. Minho records all this and their failures begin to make more sense, which makes them happy and they start to reveal all their abilities one by one. The next day, they enter the dungeon again and notice a group of skeletons walking ahead. This time, they are better prepared and take a position as Tuya runs ahead and uses his taunt skill, which makes all the enemies chase him, while the rest remain hidden. Suzu isolates one of the skeletons and, together with Minho, attacks him, but Minho gets knocked down. Rudy arrives just in time and blocks the arrow, and instead of using his fireball, he uses lightning magic and kills the skeleton. Meanwhile, Tai fights for enemies at once, takes a lot of damage and loses health. Luckily, Ser is in position and immediately restores his health while he defends. This gives him an advantage since he remembers how Neo told him to always be a cultured man who likes thighs to the love of juicy thighs. He again taunts and hits two enemies. If we're blocking the attack and telling the others to prepare to attack, they all take positions. Then while Tuya continues to taunt the enemies and Suzu begins to use her attack Sam, while Ruby uses her fireball to finally hit all of their enemies, if we're freezing them all, which will ultimately lead to their complete destruction. They remain on guard and approach the edge of the dungeon door, where they realize that they have completed this level and begin to celebrate their hard-earned victory. Later that night, Shira is busy in the castle recording everything that happens and preparing documents, then at the same time worrying that they will not be able to pass this level. They may lose their memory if they die while working. Minho calls in and says that they were able to complete the quest in the dungeon and tomorrow it will go inside for the last time. Shira congratulates her and asks her to tell the details about everyone's performance that she writes down. As a complete bore, the next day, at the show on the beach, there is a disaster and his group runs there since Mary just told them that fish monsters are attacking the beach. He arrives at the beach and discovers an insane amount of these monsters jumping out of the sea and landing on the beach with a weapon, hurting a person. Everyone starts fighting while Mary tells them to run away, but they are also attacked by fishes surround her. But Sho arrives just in time and engages them in battle before telling her to run into the forest. While he fights the beast, Mary runs away and Sho jumps there alone to make fresh sushi. The experienced players try to kill as many zombies as possible, but they are surrounded while they are trying to waste time for the newbies to get to the safe zone. Meanwhile, even now and the others were fighting a gang of goblins in the jungle while the leader was flying to find out what was happening. He went down back to the camp and told them that he saw thousands with trolls and other large monsters walking through the jungle forest towards the kingdom of the source. They all try to contact Mary and the others, but nothing works for them. So now, they contact Shiro and tell him the details. Shiro immediately calls a conference of the council members in Google Meet and reports them that today monsters have attacked in very large numbers on the beach and in the forest. He tells them that according to the chief he saw an army of at least 10 goblins marching in front, but there could be many more of them. Suji asks, what could be the reason for this, and Shiro replies that in his opinion a new goblin king has been crowned. He explains that in the forest there is a goblin castle and twice a year, new goblin is crowned there while the adventurer's task is to kill a new one. King of the goblins appear even before the king was crowned. This time the adventurers were busy killing each other and trying to establish a dictatorship, and that is why no one cared about stopping the gob, and because of this, a new king must have been crowned who unites the monster races to create a huge army and attack humanity. The world claims that in his opinion Akiba has enough adventurers to deal with this problem, but Siru tells him that the problem is the Easter Lord because they are not enough are strong. Henry interrupts us during the break and states that the time has come for the NPC heroes to come and save these lords, but Shiro says that they don't even know if they now exist in this world or not. By the time even falls, Mary's group in Neo's group eventually unites and he tells Mary not to worry as Shiro will find some way out of this mess, and she goes to change clothes. When she returns she suddenly starts putting out the fire as they notice a bunch of torches in the mountains. It looks like a squad of goblins heads towards them. They take out a map and gather around the fire while the leader tells them that for now they are safe as it is just a small troop that is going to attack a nearby village and plunder as much food as possible. Minnow states that the village is not protected and will be easily destroyed by these goblins, and To and Rudy support the idea that they should fight while Isuzu tells them to shut up as their weaknesses will not help defeat these goblins. Mio thinks it is kindness which the villagers show and asks to let them help the village. Meanwhile Shiro gathers everyone at the table and says that he called Suji and gathered his forces to meet with the mayor's office now so that they can go to the east. Shiro also tells them that he knows something about death in this world and explains that unlike when they played the game, now death comes with a penalty since they lose their memories every time they die. This shocked the leader of the merchants, who asked Shiro to tell more about what memories and how much are lost, but Shiro himself has no idea. Suddenly, the botanist spoke up and stated that he died twice fighting demons in the first days when he was transported here and he lost part of his memory and memories too. But I thought that it was just a coincidence. Shiro became interested and asked what memories he lost, and he answered that both times he lost some memories from the real world, but since he never saw the sun in real life, most of them were simply useless. Meanwhile, Mary refuses then and his squad to protect the village since it is too dangerous and tells them to wait until Shiro decides what's the best way to proceed. Rudy says that he is not a little _ Shiro and he will still go to the village, but Isuzu tells him that he did. I'll kick his ass if he goes alone. In the end, Minnow spoke up and asked Mary to let them go and at least evacuate the village, and Mary agreed to this request. They walk through the forest towards the village while Minnow tells them that she lied and will protect the village instead of just evacuating it, and they suddenly notice a man who is from the side of the village. A column of smoke rises. They enter the village only to find that it is completely burnt and destroyed like my heart. And while searching for survivors, Tuya notices a couple of goblins playing with a doll, which enjays him since men don't play with dolls, so he rushes at them alone and starts fighting while Rudy runs away from behind and helps him with magic to kill the goblin while he deals with the other one. After that, Rudy starts arguing with Isuzu about how they need to protect the others, while Toa buries the doll so that no one can find it. A few moments later, Neo and the others arrive. Van Minta tells them that she has a plan and she wants them all to hear it. She claims that they cannot protect all the villages this way, so they should change their strategy and attack the goblins themselves. Instead, Minnow uses her magic to see in the night and now contacts the others and tells them that they have decided to take the initiative and will attack the goblins instead since they don't protect their back. Since they have no special training to do it will be easy, plus the police chief himself will be there to protect the news if necessary. Mio looks through her telescope and discovers that To provoked the crowd of goblins and is now running towards them, so everyone takes their positions, and as soon as they appear from the bushes, Sarah uses her root spell to bind them while Rudy creates an ice sword for Tuya, who uses this destroys the goblins while the other two goblins run at them from behind, but Rudy uses his fire magic to weaken them and then, together with Ayasuru, uses a massive attack to destroy them, and immediately returning to the palace, Shira talks with Brock Lesnar and the botanist and tells them that they will most likely have to take part in this war since the ISIS Lords would like the adventurers to go fight against the goblins since they are essentially immortal before they can decide anything. The king's lords are convening. In the meantime, Minnow and the others sitting by the fire discussing their strategy. All Rudy is Dean cleaned magic gloves that they had recently found and that could only be used by a mage, so the group decided to give it to him. Minnow gets up again and tells them to start moving as they need to kill more goblins, and they go deeper into the jungle again. Returning to the meeting, the lords say the same old diplomatic things over and over again. So Sira gets to the point and asks about the status of the goblins, a legendary heroes. One of the lords states that they don't want to be bothered over such a small war, so the adventurers in Akiba have to deal with this themselves. Another lord says that they know that Akiba has a huge army, but Sira corrects him that they don't have a standing army to carry out a raid fight, as they are all adventurers and are free to do whatever they want. One of the lords stands up before yelling at them for being cowards because they are so strong but still don't want to fight against the goblins, and even if they die, doesn't matter since they can just be revived. It really angered Brock, who slammed his fist on the table breaking it and yelled at the lord to shut up since they are not his pets and don't work for all, so they don't have to help them. All the lords shut up, but one ugly baldy spoke up saying that they are super strong so it should be easy for them to defeat the goblins. Brock told them to shut up because the Akiba adventurers would never trust Isis and help him like that. Before they were able to continue the conversation, the princess herself entered the room and decided that she wanted to show what kind of girl she was. Barefoot, she looked at the botanist and told him that she wanted him to take her to the Kiba. While all the lords were wondering if there was any way there was a new shopping complex, the princess clarified that the adventurers are free people, so she wants to go there and express her respect to them before asking them for this call for volunteers for this battle with the goblins. She also says that the legendary heroes have disappeared and will not join the battle, the Changje the lord, since they kept it a secret. But the king claps his hands and everyone falls silent. The princess continues that everyone they try to just use the adventurers as tools, but she will go herself and show them respect, and even if 10 to 15 adventurers agree to fight, it will be a huge help. After she finished her speech, she just passed out from all this hard work and fell asleep. Returning into the forest, Minnow and the others walk through the forest and continue to be scared of even the birds at night because they are so vigilant. They all laugh at this before moving forward with the sole purpose of destroying the goblins. Meanwhile, the botanist puts the princess on a griffin. Shira follows him along with Akatsuki and they return to Akiba. They all finally get to Akiba, and the princess, simply shocked that such a city can even exist. There are food stalls along all the roads. People eat and have fun, while in some places the artists dance and the idols sing while everyone enjoys the night and party as much as they want. The nerd tells the princess that Shiro will take her to the city, and he goes to meet with his guild members to inform them about the new information they have collected. Shira takes the princess to the warehouse where they meet with Shin, who Shira has already informed that he is ready to receive the princess. He seems very impressed so far. Shira takes him to the dressing room so that they can choose suitable clothes for her that will not embarrass her. Vig sees differently and gives her the look of a real warrior. Meanwhile, several children enter the room. They are happy to see a real princess and even give her a burger which she eats. She is surprised by the taste of this dish since she has never had diabetes before, but in the end she drops some sauce on her clothes. Fortunately, it does not matter since Shira is standing nearby to undress her and give her the new clothes that he chose for her. Katsuki talks about making the princess beautiful, and at the same time the princess seems to feel uncomfortable because she believes that these clothes should be worn by women who belong on the street and are not a princess. Well, Katsuki tells her to shut up. The royal family. She tries on the dress just in time for Shira and Shin to see it. After that, Shira gathers all the people in the area and goes on stage. Before turning on the lights, he quickly greets them. Before saying that they are here to make a decision that could affect their future, he informs them that about 20 goblins have united and are moving towards any city or village that catches their eye and completely destroy it. He tells them that the goblins are moving towards a stele and will lose about 70% of their strength if left alone with the threat. The adventurers immediately begin to study maps and discuss strategies for protecting their city and also calculate how many resources it will need for such a large-scale invasion operation. This completely shocks the princess because she understands that these people are not stupid soldiers who know nothing other than following orders. They are free people, each of whom has a trained brain to cope with such situations, and at least almost all the players here have a tactical mindset. The general who sits on her military council in Estel, Sira, continues talking and informs them that Akiba should be safe, and when the goblins come to the area, they can very easily completely destroy them, and given this they have no real reason to save or help the Ailu from rescuing Niel. Before handing the microphone to the princess for her to give it, at her request the nerd immediately turns the light on the princess. She moves forward and seems afraid to say anything in front of so many people, but the nerd tells her that these people have never sniffed a girl in real life, so the princess has their full attention. The princess takes a deep breath and steps forward before introducing herself and telling them that their kingdom will be destroyed if no help is given because the legendary heroes have disappeared, and now there is no one around who can protect them from this problem. She tells them that from the body she would pay them in gold, but their city is already 100 times richer from the body, so it is useless, but she promises to take a photo of their legs if they want to fight for her kingdom. The insulter immediately begins pounding the staff on the ground like barbarians and shouting that they want to fight for her and her legs, which completely shocks the princess since she didn't expect the adventurers to be so cruel. The botanist immediately tells them that he will lead their army and Anyone who does not kill at least 5 goblins will not receive any rewards, while Shira tells them that he will be the strategist and tells them that he will inform them about the plan after a while and they will all leave the area. The next morning everyone is preparing to move and it turns out that at the moment they have managed to gather a total of about 200 people since they cannot transport more people. Right now Shira gives the botanist a ship with a small detachment of about 100 people to go to the IC, and he takes the remaining forces using horses and carriages, telling Brockus to create a headquarters in the forest where there are very few monsters. Brock agrees and tells him that he will look after the nobles. If for interrupting the conversation, soon Heinrich informs him that the king himself wants to talk to. Then they go to the room where the king is left alone. The king claims that the lords are unhappy that the princess was allowed to leave the house without especially washing the dishes and believe that the royal family is under threat. Control over the adventurer Rock thinks about this and asks the king what he wants to do, and the king replies that he wants them to sign a non-aggression treaty so that none of them can attack the other and also conclude a trade pact so that they can increase trade between themselves, which will help in a relationship as well as economics. Rock laughs and agrees to the deal and also advises him to be less sexist, otherwise he will provoke the girls with blue hair. Meanwhile, the nerd hijacks a ship near the port of Estel, where people are waiting for their arrival. The princess seems worried about the whole situation, especially because she looks like underscore. But the nerd tells her that they should watch Netflix and calm down before the princess can answer. The nerd calls him to the vice captain who tells him what he has to tell adventurer about the order of battle back in the city. Neo and the rest of the adventurers, including the news, have successfully defended the nearby towns from the first wave of goblins and seem very happy about it, while Rhea apologizes for not believing in their strength from the beginning and tells them that their job is not all done and they will have to protect many more towns before this is all over. Back on the ship, the botanist finally turns to the adventurers and informs them that they will be divided into 4 groups in order to move faster and more efficiently. Vitsa the captain informs the princess that Botanist is one of the few people among them who actually commanded a huge army, so he is perfect for this role, and she also tells her that Botanist has been assigned 12 guards to protect her, but she must not cheat on him and break his heart. Botanist shouts at the adventurers to prepare for battle and orders them to destroy every monster that dares to stand in their way. By the time many fall, they all gather on the battlefield, while the vice captain gives the magic potion to the princess, who is able to see the world. A huge army of goblins marches towards them in full force. The magicians deliver massive magical blows that destroy most of the goblins, which gives the botan and his foot soldier the opportunity to enter into battle. They rush towards the goblin forces and the botan jumps with his giant axe and begins to destroy the goblins left and right in one attack, while simultaneously receiving support from the magicians. Then he uses his special attack to destroy a huge number. The goblins are surprised at them with their magic, while he runs up to one of them and jumps on his shoulder before delivering a powerful blow, destroying the enemy. While the princess watches the bestial grin on his face back at the headquarters. Shira has set up a call center with the help of which he develops and implements his strategy so that the communication between the various units and the headquarters is uninterrupted. Tyres thinking that the battle is almost over, but Shira tells him that there is the problem is if the goblins are defeated, they will scatter in different directions, which means they will attack any villages that come their way. To prevent this, Shira used his strategy to surround the goblins and then destroy their forces, but the problem is that the cities on the coast where there are only a small number of troops, including Mary and News, if the fish monsters capture this city, they can disrupt the formation and create problems. And Katsuki asks, he himself does not go into battle, but he replies that until all the forces are deployed, he can't leave the headquarters back in Coastal City. The News seems to be very worried and nervous about this battle. Almarie looks through her telescope and notices a huge number of monsters coming out of the sea. She looks back and sees Neo giving her a thumbs up, giving the command to the News so that they can all finish off these monsters before they reach the city. Shira finds out that there are only 60 adventurers in the city against thousands of enemies, and he will quickly send reinforcements. Meanwhile, the battle begins, and in the first hour the news seems overwhelming, but Chief stops him and tells him to restore his strength and Manu on the first before entering the battle again. Now I notice that Dao goes into battle without any fear and defeats several enemies at once, while Sarah provides him with support and cover along with summoned creatures that help her effectively and easily deal with the enemies. Even Isuzu and Rudy seem to be fighting well as Rudy jumps into the middle and uses a fire spell to destroy the enemies around. While all this is happening, Minho is keeping an eye on the status of each member of the group and also strategizing. This reminds them of the style that Shiro used, which helped him basically predict what will happen in 30 seconds, and even though Minho can't do it, she still tries to imitate it as accurately as possible. After defeating the nearby monsters, Minho tells Neo that they will now attack the goblins, and although Neo tries to stop them, they run away. They approach a field where they spot several goblins and Joe the stakes, so Minho tells Rudy to provoke them, so he uses his lightning magic which provokes them all, and they start running towards them, while Isuzu uses his song magic to slow them down and finally jumps while standing and starts cutting them into pieces, while the others use their magic to destroy them. Even after they killed so many enemies, They hear loud noises from the beach, so they immediately run back. Mary heals her wound while Shira calls her and says that reinforcements will arrive in an hour and they need to hold out. Until then, Mary transmits information to the fighters, who somehow cope with the monsters. But the afternoons begin to get tired, and Rudy's mana is especially low due to the constant use of spells. Suddenly, and it starts to rain, a dire wolf appears from behind the rock, and not only he but also a small group of goblins with several more wolves block their path. They all engage in battle, but somehow they manage to cope with the goblins together, but the wolves begin to run away from them. Sarah kills one of the wolves, but the other one dodges and tries to attack Tuyo. But Minnow uses her magic to protect him. She tells Sarah to focus on catching the wolf while the others attack the two goblins in front of them, and together they are able to destroy them. Suddenly Minnow notices that Tuyo's health is decreasing and finds that he is being attacked and somehow manages to create a shield in front of him. While Minnow notices that his health is decreasing, and Suzu and Rudy rushes at the entrenched wolf, but he manages to break free and runs past them to attack Toa. Sarah tries to heal him, but he continues to get hit and is about to die, being completely surrounded while Minnow freezes in place, scared that Toa will die. Rudy suddenly starts running up to the wolf, jumps on him with his bare hands and begins to distract them while the wolf hits him against the wall from the inside. Toa is also attacked by the goblin, but he blocks while the wolves are running away with Rudy, and we are about to eat him, but he gets inside his mouth and uses fire blast to destroy them. Minnow and the others immediately rush towards him, but find that he is lying on the ground, while Sarah quickly tries to use a revive spell, but it doesn't work. Minnow uses an even more powerful revive spell, but it doesn't work either, and Suzu falls to his feet and tells them the truth as they gradually realize that Rudy was never an adventurer and all just an ordinary NPC who really wanted to become an adventurer, and that's why Suju kept it a secret. Toy realizes that this means that he can't be revived no matter what, and while Oru cries, Sarah decides to use her healing spell instead, but it seems like it's not powerful enough, so Minnow immediately calls Asura and asks him for help. Shiro immediately runs out next to Akatsuki and sits on the griffin before rushing to their position. He calls out to them and tells them to keep using the Ravivu cast spells on Rudy and use any healing spells they have, as he explains to Akatsuka that even though Rudy's mana is 0, his health was preserved for a while using a little instant resurrection magic, and if his theory is correct, then there is a way to resurrect Rudy. Then Mary calls him and tells him that reinforcements have arrived and the battle at sea has begun, and that now they should be okay. Shiro immediately rushes as fast as he can and then jumps down and asks for Katsuki to help him on the beach. He runs into town and finds Rudy unconscious on the ground while the group uses their healing spells on him. Shira tells them to add him to the group and then uses a new magic skill and channels everyone's mana into Rudy, causing his brain to come alive again, but he is in a coma state, so he tells them all to use all their healing abilities, and of course Rudy opens his eyes when everyone around him is crying. Shira immediately signs the contract and tells Rudy that he is offering him a position in his guild, which will mean that he will become an adventurer. According to these are the terms of the contract. This will mean that he will no longer be an NPC. Shiro realizes that he was powerful enough to create such documents that can bypass the laws of this game. Rudy manages to put his signature on the contract, and a yellow light begins to emanate from him as he floats in the sky, and Seer says that he will be reincarnated again in the church. Returning to the battlefield, a huge army of direwolf and hobgoblins is approaching the army, and the botanist meets him in the valley with his powers, and the goblins cannot compare with his powers as they destroy the monsters one by one using arrows and even a fire bird which sweeps them away. Some of them survive, but the botanist is more than happy to deal with them and uses Unstrike to finish off the hobgoblin. With this, their first battle ends both on the beach and on the mainland, giving our hero some time to rest since the battle. A month has passed, 10 while Shiro remains locked in his room as the loser that he is. The rest enjoy a luxurious party thrown by the king. Shiro is not interested in these formalities since he knows that the battle with the goblins weren't over yet, and the goblin king was still hiding somewhere nearby trying to regain his strength. He finally went out to get some fresh air and noticed a woman telling stories to the children that reminded him of Orega, a creepy sorceress. So he went to his library, where he apparently found out about the magic that he created used to resurrect the NPC and make him an adventurer. According to him, this is world-class magic because it can change the way our world works. But he also told him that recently he saw a similar magic ray on the other side, is consonant, but he doesn't know who is strong enough to create it. This scares Shiro little. O'Regan also warns him that the Goblin King is not the only problem, as there are rumors that soon there will be some more monsters on the other side of this world. Shira thanks him for the information and returns to the party where everyone is finally dancing, so even he decides to dance with Lally, who from this becomes Aha. Next week they all return back to Akib, including the princess, who decided to stay in Akibi as the ambassador of Eastern China. Shira also spreads rumors that people lose their memories when they die, and thus there is no panic or hoss but this leads to the adventurers not trusting Shira too. Several months pass and finally Akiba decides to hold his first festival to liven things up and bring some life back to the city. The festival begins in full swing and everyone seems to enjoy it while Shira, as usual, locks himself away with his paperwork and tries to skip the festival as often as possible. He spends time talking with Akatsuki about their lives and goals, and through this they become closer and begin to develop feelings for each other, while the homewrecker Minnow, who is also in love with Shira, witnesses its development and begins to feel sad about it. The next day of the festival begins as expected, while Minnow holds back her feelings and Akatsuki finds ways to constantly be close to Shira. While walking with Akatsuki at the kiosk, Shira notices that the establishment is becoming nosy as the NPCs become aggressive towards the adventurers, and one of them even tries to hit the Shiryu, but he blocks the blow with his finger and the NPC just leaves in the meantime to take his mind off Shira. Minnow ends up helping Shin with the paperwork since Kibu has been getting a lot of new people to work lately and notices that there are a lot of serious flaws in the paperwork that seem intentional and the plan. Shiro immediately became worried about this and sent Katsuki to find out about the current state of security. Since he thinks that Akiba is attacked, he quickly runs back to the council chamber where he and Henry begin to try to figure out the cause of this strange series of problems they are facing. Were problems where people ordered something but received something else, their luggage was lost and they couldn't get what they wanted to get a refund, no matter how long it lasts. Meanwhile, the princess organizes a small feast for the Lord of Mala, a nobleman from another area who comes to head to make an agreement with both Isis and with advice, but Princess is extremely worried because he is known for being unpredictable and rude. Back to the Shiro council, received a message at the mall. Lore has arrived in the city surrounded by a group of bodyguards. He believes that this Lore may be behind this whole series of problems as he is trying to make people hate the council for his incompetence. According to him, the Lord wants to destroy the relationship between Isis and Akibo so that they can make some kind of treaties that will benefit him the most. Henry asks if they should shut down the festival, but Sira advises her not to do this as the Lord wants this to happen so that he can tell the council that the festival should be closed. This is completely useless and filled with idiots. He immediately contacts whoever is currently having fun on the street and asks him to monitor the surroundings and make sure that no new conflicts arise. Back at Shima's workshop, he is faced with an insane load of paperwork, but Minnow takes command and begins to solve the problem in supersonic speeds up the work, sorting out complaints and dealing with the ever-growing pile of documents that she has to sort through. In the meantime, Toa, who is trying to control the situation in the customer service department, can't do anything because of the crazy queue of people wanting to solve their problems. Back at the council, Shiro focused on the map and the areas where these problems are occurring because he can't find a pattern behind these problems, and even when Henry informs him about the broken carriage that is blocking the road, he still can't understand why this could have happened or what exactly. That's why I chose this particular road. Back at the festival, the NPCs are spreading rumors that the council is trying to rob people as scammers from India. Arak scares them away. The chief calls the sire and tells him that a lot of luggage has been lost, and he thinks that this is all intentional since many NPCs whose problems have been solved are still creating a lot of noise and are not allowed to move from the place of the queue. All the number of people whose things are lost is growing. Along with this, the NPCs blame the adventurers for these problems because the adventurers themselves are keyboard warriors who do not accustomed to listening to empty talk and not saying anything. Shira is completely depressed and confused, but even the chief cannot figure out the situation, while Shira thinks about each incident over and over again, repeating to himself that there must be some kind of pattern behind all this no matter what. Suddenly, Henry Akatsuki tells Shiro that two more problems have arisen at the doorstep of a diabetic's house. A large amount of pizza has been delivered and several people have urinated in the pool. That's when it dawns on Shira that there is absolutely no pattern in these incidents, and some underscore whose brain doesn't work improvises all this. The problem is that Shiro can't think like that because it's very impossible for him to deal with randomness, so he ends up going to the lake to get some rest alone when Suji and his Itori J-kun and tell him that they just had a bunch of free cake that was delivered to some random fat guy's house. Shiro realizes that this is the key to solving the problem since only a brainless person can defeat a brainless Soda, and says him to take the situation into his own hands and just do whatever he pleases. Meanwhile, back at the party, the princess expresses her gratitude to the adventurers who are happy with the choice of fee and tells her not to worry, and while she was worried about the storage problem, Lord N.L. walks into the room surrounded by his guards, walks right up to the princess and ends up with me insulting her a little. This idiot, who looks like Voldemort, tells the princess that they are nobles and should not be in the same room with commoners. Adventurer, one of the adventurers, tells him to relax and enjoy life, but the guards immediately knock him down. The adventurers seem angry, but one of the maids apologizes and the princess tries to make him angry while he sniffs her hair like my uncle did when I was little. The adventurers seem to get angry. All the guards provoke them even more, but the princess gives them a side do-nothing. Demort takes the glass and pours all out the wine out at the same time, insulting Kiba and Ice is back in the city. The problem is gradually being solved as Suji and his entourage of girls are seducing people left and right, which makes them forget about their problems. Suddenly Shiro receives a message that there are some problems at the party, so he asks the chief to take command while he tries to find a way to solve other problems. Meanwhile, at the party, Voldemort gets angry at the princess for not preparing enough space to store all the things he brought. While the princess is starting to get tired, luckily, at the last moment he appears. Shiro and decides to deal with Voldemort himself. While Voldemort looks at Shiro, even the botanist and Brock arrive to meet him and tell him that they are members of the council, who right now represent Akib. Shiro tells Voldemort that as he heard there were some problems associated with the letter that was sent to the princess about preparing a storage room for food and spices, which the princess never received, and Voldemort replies that the princess is useless and did not prepare for anything. The botanist approaches him and shows the letter written by Shiro and tells the Lord that the council received this letter and prepared for everything. However, the Lord says that according to the information he has, there is not enough storage space in the Akiba warehouses. But Brock comes up and states that his trading warehouse has more than enough space to store everything, and he is even willing to borrow carts to transport goods. Voldemort begins to worry since Shiro already knew that the Lord did not send any letters and did not bring any food that could spoil, and all this was a strategy aimed at them in order to make the princess feel bad. The Lord immediately leaves for his ship as he wants to get some fresh air, while Shiro and the others decide to end the festival with a bang, and they put on a lot of concerts and fireworks which entertain the entire player base, ending the festival with the failure of the Lord's plan and also making everyone else happy. In the evening he sits down at the table and has dinner with Minho, who makes him understand that the Lord cannot be the master of the situation, so he goes to investigate and finds the woman he once saw in the castle in the Steely. He immediately recognizes her and tells her to show her true face, so the woman just takes off her makeup and becomes even more beautiful, and before she explains that this whole plan was thought up by her to somehow get Shiro into her guild, because in the real world she was always ignored because she was a TikToker, so she started playing games and even their people laughed at her. One day she met Shiro, who didn't care about her TikTok account, and he even called her talented. Since that day she has been lusting after him and even took control of the whole continent to somehow make everyone hate Shiro and Akib, which will make him leave, and in his moment of vulnerability she will make him fall in love. She walks up to him and starts touching him before telling him to leave Kiba and go with her because she loves him very much. Shiro slaps her and says that he is Rice King, and Heat. The girls were already ingratiatingly furry, got angry and left. Shiro returned to his guild and started a heart-to-heart conversation, during which Minho and he told them how much they had learned from him